Steel Curtain Network.
Touchdown! Touchdown para Calvin Austin! El Monte Washington es arma. ¿Quién más? ¿Quién más? DJ Watt!
What is going on, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and welcome to another episode of the Steelers Preview. If you're watching us live, you see there's only two of us. Brian Davis is handling some business right now, so it's just myself and Dave Schofield. Dave, what's up? How's it going?
It's going, Jeff. It's just as the title of the show says, at what point do you just move on? And that's what I feel like. At what point do I just move on and get other things done and not worry so much about what's going on with news with the Pittsburgh Steelers? But I'm always worried about it. Well, not worried about it. I'm always checking in. It's a good day, Jeff, because my goodness, especially you being a Pittsburgh fan,
Yep.
You've got baseball, you've got hockey. The only thing missing is plenty of stuff going on with the Steelers. But I will tell you, Jeff is holding up the game on his phone. For those of you that are listening in the audio that obviously can't see that. Was it 4-1 last I checked?
4-2.
4-2 now. Okay.
Top
like I said, there's hockey, there's college basketball back on tonight. Yeah. And yet, if there was Steelers news, if there was something going on with the Steelers quarterback, it would dominate the headlines.
Yes. And so, but before we get into the quarterback discussion, which is going to be obviously a hot button topic, as the title would indicate, at what point do you just move on? I wanted to give you an opportunity to we're not just plugging steelcurtainnetwork.com, but also the article that you ran today, Thursday morning at 8:00. And that's the latest salary cap update. Before you give us the number, so before you give us the approximate amount of cap space the Steelers have left, what contract are you missing?
All right. The only contract that I am missing right now is Jeremiah Moon.
Okay.
And the Steelers haven't announced that yet.
Got it.
So, right? Am I correct? I don't think we've got an official announcement because the day that he signed, it was an agent that reported it, but then the Steelers announced James Pierre. So we don't have anything official from the Steelers yet about Moon. And even if they did, are they really going to pay more than what they would have as an exclusive rights free agent?
Doubt it.
I don't think he's going to land in the top 51 because the Steelers have displaced so many contracts that he would end up as the same value as someone that he would bump out. So the displacement would be zero. So that's kind of where the Steelers are. They've bumped out all their contracts. Every year it's different because your contract's based on your years of experience. The minimum anyone can have this year is someone who has no years of experience, which is $840K. Because you have 840,000 contracts, you have 960,000 contracts. Those are guys with 1 year experience. And then guys with 2 years experience, I guess going into their third year, they're 1.03 million. And the Steelers already have a bunch of them that are not even in the top 51. So the way it goes is smaller moves like that right now are generally not going to change much.
All right. So I had you down. I wrote it down because I said it on Let's Ride. You had in your article $33.6 million in cap space. And correct. I trust your numbers. I trust your numbers wholeheartedly over a lot of other people's, for sure.
It also helps that just because when I came up with this number at the time, they hadn't caught up to everything that I had from other places. But by the time I ran the article, I had to change it because they did over the cap, and I have the exact same number. Okay. Now I had it before you know what I'm saying? I had it before they had all the contracts in, but when they got all their contracts in, we had the same number.
So 33.6 million, and this is going to eventually tie into the quarterback discussion. Mm-hmm. You kind of are the question is let's assume, and it could be a hasty assumption that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for the Steelers in 2025. Okay. Well, how much is that going to cost? Because Russell Wilson, he garnered 10.3, I think, guaranteed millions, and he could have upwards of 20 plus. I think 23 is the max. He have to win 17 games though. And so you're thinking to yourself, like, what are the odds of that happening?
And it's the Giants who I think aren't they tied for the lowest number of projected wins? Projected wins doesn't mean anything. Right. You know, that's just for people to bet on. I mean, it's not that it doesn't mean anything. Right. Generally, they're pretty close. They're within a couple games. But when you're at the bottom, that's if you turn around and win 17 games, that would be the ultimate turnaround.
So I guess it's everything that you hear. Tom Pelissero was on with Jim Rome. I saw a clip today on Twitter that he said that the Steelers, it would be a 1-year deal. Like it's just going to be a 1-year deal, and that's been reiterated by several other sources, not just Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network. I got to ask you, Dave, if you had to guess, like where do you think this contract would come in with Aaron Rodgers?
Oh my! See, going back to a 1-year deal, I did not hear that today. So that's good. I'm glad that you're telling me this, because everything I had heard in the past, now granted, things changed so much, and I know this was at least a week old, that Rodgers, the big thing that the Steelers wanted is they wanted him to commit to play for the life of the contract, and they wanted to do a 2-year deal.
Right.
So that was like what Rodgers is thinking about isn't just about this year, but it's also about the next year. Maybe that's why it's backed off to just 1 year. Because with 2 years, I thought, even if you carry some of that as dead money the next year, that's not the end of the world. To me, the big thing is, that the Steelers have $33.6 million in cap space, but they still have $15 million in expenses. They're going to have to sign their draft class, which actually that keeps trickling down lower and lower because of the roster displacement, the way I have that figured out. But they're going to need to do that. So if they end up trading in or trading to where they get more picks, that could change the number that they need to sign their draft class. That's just based on their picks that they have scheduled right now. That's what that number is based off of. By the time the season comes around, the last two guys on the roster, player 52 and player 53, will count against the roster. Now, if you cut somebody that was in the top 51, and there's not a lot of dead money there, I mean, because the dead money, you don't save anything from that. If you cut someone that doesn't have, that they have a lot of non-guaranteed salary and things of that nature, then you could actually make that up a little bit. You got to sign your practice squad. You've got to have some money going to the next year. So if you're talking 15 million, you're really only talking about 18.6 that you would have that's usable right now. But then again, if you give TJ Watt an extension, that's probably going to bring his number down for this year, right? Things of that nature. So I don't necessarily always feel like you have to save that 15 million now. You just got to make sure you have a way to get it back by the time the season rolls around. So that was a long answer to say, what would 1 year look like? I personally, I don't want anything more than like 22 million. And that I still think is a lot. If it's more than that, I would just rather roll with Mason Rudolph.
And that's the thing for me. Like I look at this and say, a lot of times, and this is going to tie in, this is going to lead right into the topic of today's. At what point do you just move on? At the very top of the show, you talked about how for you, you were constantly checking and what's it going to be. I was like that until they signed Mason Rudolph. Yeah. At this point, for me, it's like, if it happens, it happens. If the dude retires, he retires. If he goes to Minnesota or is holding out for the Vikings, who the hell cares? I have essentially, and this is not getting away from the Aaron Rodgers talk, I have essentially convinced myself that this is a bridge year for the Steelers. I haven't said the Pirates because that's who I got.
That's because it's been a bridge year for the Pirates
exactly,
since what, 2007?
2016, yeah. Okay. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm convinced that this season is just going to be, it's going to be fun. It's going to be entertaining. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to cover it like we did any other year. But I have no expectations for this season. I have none. Not to make the playoffs, not to win a playoff game, not to win the division, not to have a winning record. Nothing. So for me, it's like, hey, if you want to roll with Mason, let's roll with Mason. Save the cap space. Let's get Mason. Let's get another backup quarterback to come in and, I don't know, maybe draft one. Who the hell cares? But for me, I'm not really sitting on pins and needles waiting for any news to come. If it comes, it comes. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I talked about it on Pittsburgh Standard Time this morning. I'm like, that first week of free agency, I said, is like having your first child, where it's all the urgency. Oh, you're all ready for it. Your anticipation. But then the second week is like the second child. The third week's like the third child. Jeff, you're going to have to attest how it goes beyond that because you're the one with 17 kids. Jeff could cover every week till the season. No, I'm just kidding.
That's true.
5. It's just 5. But because Brian's not here to make fun of you about these kind of things, I feel like I got to step up my game. But sorry, no midget porn this week. Sorry, but What was the question again? I'm
Just about the expectations of
Yeah.
waiting for the news with Aaron Rodgers. And so, yeah, go ahead if you had
To
going to
me,
finish that.
I am so back and forth with everything. And people and like Brian and I, you asked us a couple weeks ago, what is it that we don't like Aaron Rodgers? And I keep saying is I don't trust him to do what's best for the Steelers. I only trust him to do what's best for Aaron Rodgers. That's the best way I could sum up what I was trying to say at that time. But then I think about other things. I'm like, could the Steelers win 2 or 3 more games with Rodgers than they could with Rudolph? Well, could that put them in a position to actually have a better first round matchup in the playoffs if they make it? Then I'm like, do you really? It's going to make the trip maybe a little bit more enjoyable if there's something that he could pull off. But I also don't trust that he would be healthy the whole time. But there was something I was talking about with someone today, once again, talking to another Commanders fan, which I'm just like, it must be nice to have a quarterback that had a great rookie year that you're really excited about going to the next year, 2005 vibes for the Steelers. But then again, they've been burnt before, with RG3 and things like that.
Right.
But in talking to him, as like, the biggest thing that bringing in Aaron Rodgers, I'm hoping would bring is I'm so tired of the Steelers. I'm going to say specifically, I feel that it is Mike Tomlin. I'm so tired of them being scared of letting a quarterback actually go out and try to win the game unless that quarterback is someone who's been there, done that, won the Super Bowl in the past. It's like minus Ben Roethlisberger, minus that, how do I say it? That, what's the word I'm looking for, Jeff? Resume, minus that resume
There you go.
of like a Ben Roethlisberger, like what they had with Russell Wilson, like you would have with Aaron Rodgers. Minus that resume, I think the Steelers play too scared with their quarterbacks. We saw it for the first time in 2019, and it frustrated me. And I feel like it. Now, some people might say, well, they might not have been, but Mitch Trubisky kind of ruined that. Maybe he did.
Right.
But didn't you feel a big difference in what the Steelers were allowing their quarterback to do from week 6 to week 7 last year? I felt it big time. That they had more trust in Russell Wilson to just go out there and play. And my fear is if you don't have an Aaron Rodgers type, is Coach Tomlin not going to just let him play? I would, if it's Mason Rudolph and they let him play, then I'm fine with that. But I want someone to let play.
Do you think in 2023, at the very end of the season, when Mason Rudolph took over and orchestrated the playoff run, do you think that he kind of said, you know what, screw it, I'm playing with house money, and maybe because that stretch with Mason Rudolph was not careful, not like what you said and how you described it. Yeah. And so I don't know if that had something to do with him not coming back in 2024 or anything like that. But for me, it's like, I don't know. And I know there's people in the live chat talking about, wasting Cam and TJ's prime years and Cam's last years. The Steelers have painted themselves into this corner, folks.
Yeah.
This is not like, oh, wow, I can't believe this is happening in 2025. No, this has been an issue since Ben Roethlisberger retired in 2021. This is not breaking news or anything of that like. And so I don't know.
Are you saying that the Browns are wasting Myles Garrett's final years? I mean, they were drafted the same year as TJ Watt. I mean, but the Browns is the Browns.
If we want to do that comparison, so if the Steelers are going to open up the checkbook for TJ Watt, you have to ask, what are the Steelers doing?
Yeah.
Like if you're going to mortgage your future and your financial future because of TJ Watt, like they did with Myles Garrett, and you don't think that this team is ready to contend for a championship, then if they're not ready for a championship, you should trade him and get assets for him. Get yourself closer to being ready for a championship.
Because that's what the Steelers have done so much in the past. I say tongue in cheek. I'm not saying that they shouldn't.
No,
I'm just saying I'm not. Even though this is different, even though it's a different general manager, even though I've continued to say Art Rooney II is not Dan. He's not.
No.
It doesn't mean that he can't be, that the Steelers can't have success. They're just personality wise and the way he is in the locker room. That's just not the same. It is what it is. But there are certain things that I just still expect that the Steelers are going to do because it's the way they do things. I still don't think they're going to do contracts during the season. Although a lot of people felt like that's what they should have done last year with Justin Fields, things of that nature. But then what message would that have sent to Russell Wilson during the season and things like that? So asking the Steelers to do something non-Steeler-esque, but yet they still have, like, you've got the DK Metcalf trade signed for 5 years and $150 million. I do know some people are like, man, should they have? I had someone reach out to me on Twixter and ask me about, that much money to someone who's never played a snap for the Steelers. I'm like, true, but the fact that it's 5 years, I think is better. Same thing when you're looking at TJ Watt, because look at how much the salary cap is continuing to go up every year. I think the salary cap will be at or close to $300 million next year.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's just going to keep going. So sometimes locking these, look at the mistake I still think it was a mistake that they didn't sign Jamar Chase last year with the Bengals, because look how much higher the asking price was then, just based on the salary cap going up. So but you come back to trading TJ Watt or someone like that. It just doesn't feel like that's something that the Steelers would do. That feels like that's what someone would do, or trying to play their Madden season.
I get it. And I never would expect the Steelers to do that. But at the same time, you have to think to yourself too. It's like, well, you got to be realistic with where you are. And that's something I think the Steelers have struggled with, especially in the Mike Tomlin era. And he's going to say, we're competing for a sticky Lombardi and we want to see that confetti coming down. And I get it. But at the same time, if a fan can kind of look at it and see, like, this ain't it. Like, this team is not it, especially if Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback. And even with Aaron Rodgers, I don't think it is this year. But that's neither here nor there.
I want to ask you a question then. Well, first of all, before I ask that question, I do want to go back. And you said how Mason just went out there without a care in the world at the end of 2023.
Seemed like it.
That's what I called for on the preview that week. If you remember, I'm like, this
that.
could be your last chance in the NFL. Don't hold anything back. Don't play scared. Don't play timid. Don't play conservative. Go out there and fling it. Because if not, you don't want to live the rest of your life saying, man, what if I would have gone for it? Go for it. I gave the big speech, the big soliloquy that week, and I was really happy when it appeared that he did that. I just hope that if he's the guy that he does that. But I'm going to ask you this. You mentioned the confetti. That's the goal.
Right.
You want to finish a game where you're still staying on the field under the confetti. That's the goal.
That is.
And this is just you personally. I mean, people can chime in the live chat if they want to. Was Justin Fields a quarterback that you felt that that would have been the case?
No.
Is Mason Rudolph?
No. I'll be honest with you.
Is Aaron Rodgers?
No. Here's a hot take. Here's a hot take for you. I think that Mason Rudolph has a better chance of seeing the confetti come down than Justin Fields would if he was a quarterback.
I would not disagree with that statement. So people are like, I know a lot of people are like, they messed it up. They should have kept Fields. If you truly are saying, fans out there, that the Pittsburgh Steelers were, forget winning records. This is about championships. If you're really about championships, should the Steelers have settled and paid significant money to a quarterback who they didn't feel could get them to and win the championship?
Yeah. Now, I will say that I think Aaron Rodgers, I take him over Mason Rudolph. So if we're talking about potential quarterbacks, you could throw Russell Wilson, it doesn't matter. They would say Rodgers would give you the best chance for the confetti to come down, then Rudolph, then Fields. Yeah. But for me, it's all based on the fact that I don't think this roster is ready. And so it doesn't matter how.
Also, what it takes.
It doesn't matter how you construct your roster. People say, like, you're a quarterback away. Well, if you are truly a quarterback away, then you'll find a way to get that quarterback. You could trade for a quarterback. You could move up in the draft and get a big name quarterback coming out of college. It doesn't matter. There's ways to do it, but the roster that the Steelers have constructed as we sit here right now is not ready for that. They're not even
Okay.
close, in my opinion.
Well,
Just my opinion.
I'll ask
Not
you
even
this question.
close. Not even close.
Are the Steelers a Super Bowl contender if you put Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback?
No.
I say absolutely they are.
You do?
Yeah.
I don't. I think that
because you have to have that level of quarterback. And getting that level of quarterback, you either have to draft and develop them, because it's really hard to trade for them, because why would anyone ever let one of them go unless that weird circumstance like with Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck?
Right. For me, I would say that the offense could be caliber of quarterback sending go to the Super Bowl. I don't think the Steelers defense is capable.
See, I don't agree with you there. I still think the defense is the strength of this team, and I think
it is.
Yeah,
but it's not. It's not. It is the strength of this team. But when your team's not capable of winning a Super Bowl, that doesn't say that it's a Super Bowl contending defense. It's not a defense that's going to go out and win you a Super Bowl. I mean, last season we saw this defense completely fall apart down the stretch. You can say, well, it's a tough road to hoe, going with that phrase. Sure, it is difficult. But at the same time, if you're a legitimate contending defense, like you are a defense to be reckoned with, how do you get run over like that? And the defensive line hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse.
Who ran over them?
Baltimore twice.
And that's all.
Well,
Really?
So when they go to Philly, they sell out to stop. They sell out to stop Saquon Barkley, and they do. And then Jalen Hurts throws all over them. So
yeah,
it's a kind of
I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying Philly was held way under their average against the Steelers. They only rushed for 131 yards.
Right.
But they were way over their average in throwing the ball. The Steelers said, we're not going to let them run for 200 yards against us. So guess what? They said, hey, we pass when we have to. And if you're going to make us do it, we're going to do it. And they did.
Yeah.
And Najee fumbling the ball didn't help.
No.
So I'm just saying, I don't think the defense was as bad down the stretch as what some are making it out to be. Yes, it was bad against the Ravens. Specifically against the run. And that's extremely concerning. And you need to do something about that. But they were still the number 6 defense in the NFL.
Well, so
against the run. Okay. Sorry. I didn't finish my
sentence. So what were the defensive issues last year, Dave?
I think their biggest issue where they were ranked the worst was against the pass. And they weren't extremely healthy in the secondary during their roughest stretch, which did not help. But I also think that they've improved in the secondary. I know people are still wanting to say Slay's old. Yeah, but Slay hasn't showed any signs of slowing down yet, just like Cam Hayward. So yes.
Pass defense was the issue. And you
think they were 24th in pass defense and 6th in run defense.
So you think they've shored that up though this offseason through free agency so far with the Darius Slay, Brandon Echols?
I think they have a better secondary than last year right now on paper, but
that's fair.
Games aren't played on paper; they're played inside TV sets.
Exactly.
Sorry.
All right. What I want to do is I'm not going to take a super late break for a second straight week. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. We're also going to ask the question that's in the title of the podcast because we haven't even gotten to that yet. And we'll do some trivia and have some fun stuff. We'll be right back. All right, Steeler fans, thank you all for being patient. If you're watching live on any platform, obviously we didn't go anywhere, but still, I want to talk about the Steelers in terms of fan expectations. I think this is all your show is. Like if I could redo the name of your show every Thursday morning, it would be called Fan Expectations, Steelers Fan Expectations. That's what you guys always end up talking about on Pittsburgh Standard Time, but that's fine. I think that there's, I've always been the guy with the black and gold glasses on. It's funny that I wear the blue blockers that are gold, so it does actually look like I'm wearing black and gold glasses. But still, I've always been that guy that's always looked through that. But I just can't. And I said this on Let's Ride, and I know you listened because you referenced it on your podcast Thursday morning. What they're doing doesn't make sense to me at all. Like none of it does. None of it does. And outside of Mason Rudolph on a 2-year deal, I can't make any of this make sense, Dave. Maybe you can, and maybe you can help me out, but I can't make anything out of these moves that they've made.
Really?
Are you going to say comp formula?
No, I was going to say, does the DK Metcalf move make sense?
No, they have no quarterback.
Okay, because the question I asked this morning was, okay, how much of a difference would DK Metcalf have made on last year's team, especially those last 4 regular season games?
I mean, you would expect him to be that moon ball catcher that Russell Wilson throws. So, I mean, I would assume that he would make a difference.
I mean, but part of that is, would they have changed their philosophy and done more with DK Metcalf or not? That's, to me, a big question. If you're going to go out there and add a DK Metcalf and keep George Pickens and have these receivers, and let's say you even bring in Aaron Rodgers, are you going to still roll out there and say we're going to run until we can't? I mean, that's what I want to know, how much the Steelers are going to adapt to the players that they have now. That's what I don't know makes sense.
And that's across the board. That's across the board.
Yeah.
You know, Darius Slay
I don't trust them to, because it seems like they always do what they want to do. Greg mentioned it this morning, when you're coming out against the team that you threw for 400 and some yards, and you're going to insist that you're going to run the ball in order to win this game until you got to a point where you said, we better start throwing it or else we're just out of time.
Yeah.
So
nothing makes sense.
Make that make sense. Things haven't made sense since the middle of December, Jeff.
No, trust me, I know. And so that's like, for me, here I am. We're writing articles, we're doing podcasts, we're talking about this team, and nothing adds up, whether it's the 1-year contracts, whether it's the lack of a quarterback, trading for a receiver before you have a quarterback. What looks like you're just prepping for 2026 with every move that you make.
Except for all the 1-year deals, like you pointed
exactly. Out. It just doesn't add up to me. And it just feels like the Steelers are this floating vessel out on the ocean with no rudder, with no power, no wind in their sails. They just feel like they're just floating. Like, what the hell are they doing? And so this is just, and what they do with TJ Watt's going to be very telling. If they bring him back, which I'm assuming he's going to be brought, what does that look like? Is it a 3-year extension? I'm all for it. 3 years, you go 4 or 5. No, the dude's over 30. The production's not going to go up. I doubt it. His position is different, unless they're but like you said, are they going to move him around? Are they going to do the opposite of what they've done his entire career, which is, hey, TJ, you're going to rush off this side, and you're just going to be better than the person in front of you. Go get him. Since Keith Butler left.
I mean, the 3 guys in front of him, because they have to go through each layer.
Yeah. So, you would think that last year they would have said, well, hell, the offense is dedicating 3 people to stop you, TJ. We're going to move you around a little bit. They moved him to the right side 3 times a game.
Oh, yeah.
That's
it was single digits for the season.
I don't know. Okay. Yeah. We've spent a lot of time, and go ahead. What do you want to find out?
I'm going to ask you, would you feel better about the Steelers if, regardless whether it was Aaron Rodgers or whether it was Mason Rudolph, but if the answer was known right now?
Yes, just make a freaking decision and let's move on with our lives.
So we're in that zone. We're in the not knowing zone. And you know what? When we get to the knowing zone, maybe we'll feel better. Maybe we won't. But there are so many questions about this team that we're going to continue to have, that they could work out great. They could not work out great. I said this morning, I think ultimately the success of this team is going to come down to the offensive line. I think that's going to be a huge question mark, but it could be a huge advantage, but it won't necessarily. Your
biggest question on the team, in my opinion, is what you just said. The biggest question on the team.
Well, because, and as I laid out, I don't want to go into it too much again, but as I laid out, or, I don't keep referencing the show, that this morning, that's what happens when you neglected your offensive line for so long in the draft. And I am going to lay that at Kevin Colbert's feet, that when you had to try to finally get it going right, and you invested all that capital the last 2 drafts, which I think was wise, guess what? Now you're having to rely on that capital to see if it's going to work out. Like, they can't move on from Broderick Jones right now. You're like, oh, well, maybe they should upgrade. You're not upgrading your first-round pick from 2 years ago. You still got to know what you have. Same with Falatanu. You're not bringing in somebody to upgrade anything there, because for all you know, you have potential Pro Bowl. The Steelers have never had an all-pro offensive tackle ever in their history, but you have the potential of that. You're banking on Zach Frazier, who looks like the safest bet right now. Are you banking on a 4th-round draft pick from an FCS school that played adequately last year to take a big step? You're banking on your lone veteran that he continues to he can play at a higher level this coming year than he did last year, as he was coming off injury early in the season. There's a lot of question marks there. It could work out great, and it could be a disaster. But you could almost say the same thing with the defensive line, because we should have an answer there probably in a month when the draft is finishing up 1 month from now, to know if that's. All indications are that's where they've got to go in the draft high. So there's just so many questions, and to answer the question of at what point do you just move on, my answer to that is when you have to. Do they have to yet?
So, okay, so let's talk about this from an Aaron Rodgers perspective. At what point do you just move on? And do you let this thing go all the way to the draft?
Well, let's just say this. They know they're a lot more in tune of what's going to happen than what we are. Obviously.
For sure.
So they've got to feel confident that they're taking the right path. My question is this. If Aaron Rodgers decides he's going to retire, what are the Steelers? What's their move anyway, Jeff?
I think that their move would be, if he retires, is, okay, you have Mason Rudolph. He's been the insurance policy since they signed him to a 2-year contract. So, okay, you have that insurance policy. I'm not interested in a veteran, but I bet they draft a quarterback then, and they say, late round quarterback. Maybe it's a Tyler Shuck. Maybe it's a Will Howard. I don't think it's going to be Jalen Milroe or anyone like that. But you have some quarterbacks who are going to be available in the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds. They probably take one of them. But what they won't like to do, and the Steelers never like to do it, is to try and somehow make it seem like and spin it that we're going to be just fine with Mason Rudolph as our starter. They'll try.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin's very eloquent. He'll sit in front of a microphone and make you think that Mason Rudolph is the second coming of Dan Marino if he would have been drafted by Pittsburgh. When in reality, we would know that this isn't it. It'll be fun. It might be interesting, but this isn't it. And again, it all comes back to 2026. Like I keep saying.
Yeah.
I think the Steelers at some point have to draw a line in the sand. And they have to say, look, Aaron, we've been real patient, man. Like really, really patient. But at some point, we got to know. It can't come close to the draft. I just my own personal opinion. What do you think?
I'm saying that if they know what they have to have a plan of no Aaron Rodgers. They do. Yeah. And if time is making that plan more difficult, then you've got to draw the line in the sand. If that plan doesn't, if things getting drug on even to or through the draft, please tell me that's not going to happen just for my own health. But if it does, if that would change their plan, then they have to make the decision. People are like, man, Aaron Rodgers is holding the Steelers hostage. If he is, shame on them. I have to believe that they aren't being held hostage, that they know what they want to do. And as long as they still have those other options, which could even include spending money somewhere else, that they're waiting for everything. As long as it's not changing those other things, then I don't think. What are you drawing a line in the sand for? Just because you want to feel better about it, or because you actually have to be able to conduct business? If you needed to conduct business, do it. Please do it. If it's just to feel better, why then they're not. I don't think they're going to do that.
I'm fine with them waiting right now. Totally fine with them waiting right now. There's no reason to rush anything. What else are you going to get? You could have negotiated with Russell Wilson. They chose not to. They had him in the facility all last season, and they chose to let him go. They didn't want him. But when I'm hearing that from Tom Pelissero, other people, that it's a 1-year deal, that like everything has been already negotiated. It's just a matter of whether Aaron Rodgers wants to play or not. Okay. But at some point you got to say, Aaron, we got to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's the draft. I think it's got to be the draft that you have to say, look, and to think that this could go until the end of April kind of makes me upset a little bit to my stomach. But
Yeah.
It's what you said, like what's their plan if he doesn't sign? That scares me to death. And it's not Mason Rudolph. If their plan B was Mason Rudolph is our guy, let's roll with it, see what we can do, I'm all in. Underdog story, I love that. I get behind that. If their plan B is to trade for Kirk Cousins, oh my gosh, I might just go off the deep end.
I don't see that. That's too much.
You don't?
You can't take on that contract. No.
Well,
and the capital for it, I don't see that happening.
But hey, what did I say?
I'll call it now.
The Steelers never want to admit that it's kind of like it's a lost year. They truly believe it's why they went out and got Justin Fields. It's why they went out and got Russell Wilson last year. It's why they're trying to get Aaron Rodgers now. Why? Because they want the fans to know or to think that they are not only outsmarting the rest of the league by getting people on the cheap, but also that we are going to be in this to win a Super Bowl. And if you go in with Mason Rudolph, that ain't it. Everyone knows it. So in that regard, I think that the Steelers would try to do whatever it takes to get a proven commodity. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I just, when my thing is what good options, what confetti options at quarterback did they have this offseason? Either draft or free agency.
That's why I'm all about just rolling with Mason Rudolph this year.
Yeah.
Let's see what the hell we can do.
So, and I mean, so that's the thing. Sometimes you just have to say, oh, well, you didn't go get a quarterback. Well, what else? I mean, did you think Sam Darnold was that?
No.
For $100 million? I don't either. So I don't. Yeah, it's kind of a product of the situation. But I'm, like I said, I didn't want them to overpay Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson didn't make that much, so they didn't overpay him. That's for sure. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, let's get this. Nicholas Gabriel gives us $5. Thank you for the tip. We do appreciate it. He says the top 10 quarterback play is required to contend. Yes, everything else matters, the line, skill players, etc. But until the quarterback's right, every year is a quote-unquote lost year. I hate to say it, but he's right. He is right. In today's NFL, there are haves and have-nots. And when you look at the have-nots versus the haves, what is the one thing that the haves have and the have-nots don't? It's a quarterback. It is, you have a top-tier quarterback.
Yeah.
And I think like last year, the Steelers were teetering on those haves, have-nots, and then the wheels fell off down the stretch, clearly. But I just think that it's one of those situations where you're like, it's become to me as clear as day that you either have a quarterback or you don't. And like you said, and I agree 100% with you, said there were no options out there this offseason that was going to move the needle that much. So I was fine with them taking, maybe it was Justin Fields on a cheap deal. That's what we always said. What did we always say? The two things, upside and cost. Those were the two things we wanted. And I never believed that Justin Fields was going to be the guy. Could he win you some games? Could he maybe prove to run an offense that's built for him? Yes, I think he could, but I don't think he was the guy. But
or
what do you want to add?
Could you build up enough around them to where, I don't ever want to say that you can quarterback proof the team, because you really can't. You need to have. I laid this out a couple of times on past episodes of Pittsburgh Standard Time, of if you get everything lined up, the finishing thing for the championship is average quarterback play. But every other little thing that isn't top notch means that quarterback play has to be elevated. You either need a quarterback that can throw the team on their back and win games, or you need a team that is so high quality and so good of a roster that it's going to make an above average quarterback look elite.
Right.
So, and I mean, and you can argue that is kind of what the Eagles did, Because, I mean, I would call Jalen Hurts an above-average quarterback who looked elite with a great team around him. And he played a phenomenal game, one of his best games of the season, I think, when it mattered the most.
It's incredible. Like I said, and I can't remember a time in the NFL in my lifetime where that line of demarcation has been so clear cut. And you just, it almost feels like you have 6 or 7 teams that are truly vying for a championship. And the rest are just like, well, we're going to go out there and give the old college try. So
yeah. I mean, but there's always a swapping out of a team or two into those top 6 every year.
Yeah.
If you think about it. I mean, how far back do you have to go where Detroit was nowhere close to that top 6?
Not very far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even Minnesota, who I felt was one of the, now granted they didn't win a playoff game this year.
Minnesota is going to be an interesting case study this year if they go into the season with JJ McCarthy.
Yeah.
Because we have no idea what he can do. He didn't play at all last year due to the meniscus injury. And so that's going to be that team is ready to win now. We talk about teams that are ready to win now. That one's ready to win now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll be very, very curious to see what that looks like. But,
and then, of course, the injuries always had, I mean, was anyone going to stop Detroit if they didn't lose basically most of their defense due to injury? I mean, yeah.
Guys were breaking legs left and right, literally.
Yes.
Like shattering their legs.
And I mean, there's always some teams that, I mean, look, and also look how fast San Francisco fell out of that top 6.
And how fast Washington moved into it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you're always going to get some shifting around, but do you feel right now that the Steelers are ready to shift into there? I don't.
Okay, so let's continue down this path. So let's say Aaron Rodgers, for whatever reason, doesn't play for the Steelers this year. We already talked about the salary cap space. It's about $18 million. And let's say you give TJ Watt a 3-year extension, which causes that 18 to turn into, let's say, 25. Okay, so you're at $25 million. That's of spendable money. That's with the $15 million Dave allocated for injuries, rookie class, et cetera, practice squad, blah, blah, blah. Would you say, like, okay, this year we're rolling that sucker over. Let's roll that 25 over, 20 million, and then we're going to have a lot of cap space because those 1-year contracts are going to be off the books. And let's go out and let's get some instant playmakers. Let's go in the draft. Let's be aggressive. Let's get our quarterback. That, to me, if they were to say, they would never say that publicly, but if they were to say, I'd be like, man, that's a plan I can get behind. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then I don't know.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing you got to remember about the Steelers. Can you name a time that the Pittsburgh Steelers weren't doing all their offseason moves to win this year and next year? That's what they do. But what's crazy is it looks like for the first time that I can remember that they're setting up to try to win this year and win next year, but with a completely different team. It just feels that way, doesn't it? That's what's so weird about it. Are you there?
Oh, it does.
Okay. I think you're lagging on me.
Yeah, I'm here. You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
I know I froze for a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, nothing makes sense, and you can go back and ride. Oh, I think I lost you again. I think I'm back. Okay, go back and listen to my Let's Ride podcast. I don't even know what show it was, and I was just nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense. But that's neither here nor there. Let's go to a different route here before we get to trivia.
Okay.
Dave, what's your vibe going into the draft?
My vibe going into the draft. When you don't have a second round pick, that really puts hyper focus on round one. Because if you don't take that quote unquote position probably more than anything, then you're not getting it till the end of Friday night.
Yep.
So you've got to wait all the way to round 3. So no second round pick. Now, hey, I'm not saying that I wish the Steelers would have traded for Metcalf. I think that's a huge thing, huge difference. But that my vibe is there. You've got to nail your first round pick more than ever. I'll ask you this question, Jeff. If the Steelers didn't have a second round pick last year, do they have to make sure they get it right and take Zach Frazier in the first?
It's a good question. Shoot, I'm trying to think where they drafted last year. Wasn't it 23? 20. Okay. They actually won better. That's incredible. Okay. I don't know. That would have been interesting.
Not having that second round, having that big gap in the draft. Look how the Steelers filled it in whatever year that was 4 years ago with Isaiah Loudermilk, where they didn't have a 5th round pick and they traded into the 5th round, not up, into it. Yeah. That they traded. Don't be surprised if the Steelers would do that again this year, because what was the excuse they made with Loudermilk when they traded into the 5th round? Well, we were confident we were going to be getting a compensatory pick the next year that would cover for losing that pick.
Right. Did they?
I think so. Yeah, they did.
Yeah, but no, they could definitely trade away future assets if they wanted to go up in the second round and get a player for sure. Now, this is a question for you, Dave. We'll bring this up. Dave, Nicholas Gabriel gives us $10. Again, thank you very much. He said, Dave, what's more practical? Be elite at every position so that the quarterback can be average, or keep swinging at quarterback? Like him or not, Hurts is a top 10 quarterback, and Purdy, without his whole cast healthy, he won 6 games.
Yeah.
Both
I mean, some people were wondering, if that, we'll see more about Hurts this year because they lost a lot. And then if they get injuries and everything, how he'll be. I'm just saying, are you ready to put him up there with the Patrick Mahomes, with the even Lamar Jacksons, although some people, feel how they do about Lamar, with the Josh Allens, are you ready to put him there? He's let's just say this, he's building the resume, but sometimes it takes a little bit more. To me, it's really what's available to you. Is it easier to build that team or to get that quarterback? Well, those quarterbacks are so few and far between. If you don't have one, you have no choice but to try to do the other.
I don't know.
I'm not saying it's easier. I'm just saying, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, no, I know. And that's the thing. It's like a chicken and egg thing. Yeah. Do you get the quarterback or do you develop the roster? You can do both at the same time. That is a possibility. So, all right, Dave, what's your trivia? It's a dumbed down trivia, Dave, because I'm the only one here. So.
It's not a dumbed down trivia. It's just, I'm not going to ask you. I mean, I should have just made sure I asked a question where the answer was Dick Shiner and we'd have been fine. But I'm not. I didn't. Okay. All right. That we know. Hold on. I got to make sure I have this here in front of me. That I think it's pretty common knowledge, and that you would say that you do this, Jeff, that the leader in games played for the Pittsburgh Steelers in their career is Ben Roethlisberger with 249 games. I'm pretty sure this is just regular season. And do you know who he passed in order to get there?
The most games played?
Yes.
Wasn't it Mike Webster?
It was Mike Webster. That's correct. And Mike Webster is still, he was just ahead of number 3. Mike Webster had 220. Number 3 of Hines Ward. Hines Ward got close, but didn't quite get there. What defender has played the most games for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
That's a good question. I think it's someone from the 70s era, but that went into the 80s probably. For some reason, Donnie Shell is popping into my head.
Well, Donnie Shell is a great answer.
Thank you.
He is second.
Okay.
So that's how close you are. That Donnie Shell.
The next player, Big Pun just put it in the live chat. Andy Russell was the next name that came to mind.
Oh, Andy Russell's down there.
He's down there. Okay, because
he played 168 games. He's in the top 25 overall for the Steelers. He's tied with Terry Bradshaw. I'll give you a little bit more of a hint. Sure. If I'd have asked you this last year, the answer would have been correct.
It's not Cam Hayward, is it?
It is Cam Hayward.
Wow.
Cam Hayward has played the most games as a defender for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not only that, if Cam plays 10 games this season, he moves into second place behind Ben Roethlisberger.
Wow, that's incredible.
Cam has played out 211 games for the Steelers. He is 6 behind Hines Ward. He is 9 behind Mike Webster. And he just passed Donnie Shell and one other defender as the only 6 players to play 200 games for the Steelers. Do you know who that other defender is? I will tell you, it is someone from the 70s.
Was it Mean Joe?
It was not Mean Joe. It was someone who played, who started, let's just say this, he started a year after Mean Joe and played 2 years after Mean Joe was gone. That's why he's ahead.
LC?
No. LC's actually behind Mean Joe. He started the same year as Mean Joe.
Oh, okay. I didn't know they were the same. Okay.
Yeah. I know this would be more Brian's question.
I know. I'm drawing a blank.
It's the cowboy hat.
Oh, Mel Blount.
It is Mel Blount, played exactly 200 games for the Steelers. So Cam Hayward passed both Donnie Shell and Mel Blount to get to over 200 games. And well, they both had 200 and 201 for their numbers this past season.
That's an article, Dave. Just so you know, you should be turning this into an article. That's a really interesting factoid about Cam. I had no idea that he would have been that high up. So
okay.
As one of the editors, I'm telling you that should be an article.
Okay. Well, as the other editor, I'm going to say, you know what? That's probably a good idea.
Exactly.
Yeah. I knew Cam was close. I couldn't remember that he passed him. I mean, it happened this year. Do you remember anyone saying anything about it?
Not really.
Maybe I just missed it, but yeah.
There's that Michael guy from the PR department. He does a lot of this kind of odd trivia information. I don't know if he said anything, but 10 games, it's all it's going to take, and he comes number 2. Wow, that's incredible.
9 to tie Webster, 10 to move ahead of him.
And Ben's 240 something. Is that
249? He would need, so right now, the way he would need 32 games to tie Ben. He would have to, if Cam plays all 17 games this year and next year, then he's number 1.
That's crazy. That's insane.
But that's a pretty big ask.
That is a pretty big ask, but still, it's under contract, so it could happen.
Yeah, it could happen.
It could happen. Yeah. That's insane. Okay.
But also remember, he's got 17 game seasons, 16 game seasons. Look at how much you had from Shell and Blount before they were 14 games for the beginning part of their careers.
For sure. So, all right, Dave, go ahead. You have final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Yeah. Who knows where we are with the Steelers? We really don't. There's so many things, and I don't like to come in here and constantly rail on the coaches when I know that the Steelers aren't changing them. But they are a big fact. They are as big of a factor this year as the players that the Steelers acquire, because you have to look at how the Steelers ended last year. And I keep saying it ended how fans expected it to end when the season started, that it was a really tough stretch to end the year, and it was going to be tough to find wins. And unfortunately, in the last 4, they didn't find any, which was a problem. It's not an excuse. It's a problem. It just didn't happen. But it doesn't matter if the offensive line really comes together and plays well. I know some people are down on Pat Meyer. I can be one of them. But then other people have brought it to my attention. Hey, look what he did with Dan Moore. Look what they did, with various other things. So I'm like, okay, you could still go either way there. So I'm hoping that this line can come together and do these kind of things. But if the Steelers are going to run the same predictable defense and the same safe offensive philosophy, then swapping out the players might not matter. And I know a lot of the fans are saying that. And you know what? I'm not disagreeing with you. I think you're right. So as much as I want to see the Steelers improve their roster by adding the players that they're adding, as much as I want to see the players that they have improve and play better next year, I'm looking for a lot of improvement from the coaches. And some people are like, say, man, you're asking for something that's just not going to happen. And maybe I am. But if they don't, then we're looking at the ceiling of being 10-7 And but I can't remember how did I say it Tuesday night. Do you remember my phrase I used? Trounce and bounce. That's what it was. Yeah, to be trounced and bounced out of the playoffs. That's what it's going to be. So I want to see the Steelers improving, but the Steelers, it's more than just the players on the field. It's more the players and the scheme and the philosophy and everything all really do have to come together. So it's an awful lot to ask. And I also understand why people are like, I don't think it'll happen, but I'm a Steelers fan. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hope that it does.
There you go. Very good. Good show, Dave. Thanks for filling in. For those who are just tuning in, Brian is taking care of some family stuff, so that's why he wasn't able to join us. Hopefully he'll be back next week.
Yeah, we missed you, Brian.
Yeah, make sure you check out steelcurtainnetwork.com. It's a free website. You can create your own account by going to the top of the page, click log in, create a free account, communicate in the comment section, be a part of the community. We welcome any and all Steeler fans. Keep it respectful. steelcurtainnetwork.com. Check out all of our podcasts, including my Let's Ride and the Black and Gold Blueprint on the audio side tomorrow, Friday. Check out Dave's Pittsburgh Standard Time early this morning, Thursday. It's still pertinent. Dave, why don't you send us out like you always do?
Hey.
We'll see you next week on our Steelers preview.
Steel Curtain Network. Get it.
Everybody else gets a little tight.